Evangelion, both mine and Robin Williams' favorite show.
Neon Genesis Evangelion.
He probably never watched it, but I think it would have resonated. Mostly for the underlying themes of depression and self-isolation, but also for the giant robots. It's a blast. So to honor the series, let's go ahead and make a diorama featuring Unit 2's first appearance. Now, because I don't have an original thought in my brain, the idea was borrowed from this statuette, which I immediately fell in love with until I saw the price. So I figured with a small investment, I could probably build my own. In retrospect, I kinda wish I would've paid the price, but then again, we wouldn't have this video. And you guys are the most important things, obviously. We start things off with the Mayfix Unit 2 figure, which was pretty fucking pricey at 80 bucks, but definitely worth the money. For our base, I figure I could jerry rig a model kit to fit the bill. And lucky for us, Hobby Lobby was having a 40% off on model kits. So I grabbed myself a boat for around 16 bucks. Now we're only going to be using the front half since that's all you really see. So we cut it in half, leaving us with this bite-sized section. But it still needs some work, so we trace out our angle and cut the bottom out using our handy dandy Dremel, allowing for the ship to tilt backwards just like the Titanic. On the Gribble side of things, we're also going to be using a crane, radio tower, and jets that came with the kit. Now, since we're only going to be using half, and I'm not saying I did this, but hypothetically, you could put the rest of the kit back into the box and take it to Hobby Lobby for a refund, hypothetically saving yourself 16 bucks. But again, we would never do that, so let's move on to the priming. And using some primer, we douse everything in white like Shinji in the hospital, including our base, which is gonna be a 1-for-1 copy of the statue. Now, to make it, I went for an epoxy clay build, and it took me about 2 days of sculpting and drying to get the waves to look somewhat natural. I wasn't the biggest fan, but here's hoping the paint was gonna make a difference. It wasn't. On the ship side of things, I hid everything with a light gray coat and proceeded to paint the bottoms red, which, fun fact, the reason why ship bottoms are usually red is from a copper paint which keeps barnacles away. Not really relevant, but if I have to learn, then so do you. We try to go for a reveal which doesn't go as planned.
Oh, fuck you cook bitch.
But that's okay because the ship actually has a dark gray line in between, so we should be able to cover it up easy enough. And it works for the most part, leaving behind a few splotches of red for us to patch up. We finish the bottom with one last pass of red, because fuck the barnacles, and move on to the top, which after carefully masking for the 5th time, gets a quick coat of black paint, leaving us with a really good looking piece. From here, things only get worse as we mess with yellow.
Fucking great.
Not only do I mess up the detailing, but I also oversprayed and screwed up the front. So after doing everything one more time, we move on to our base, which, following the trend, ends up looking like hot garbage. The paint couldn't save it, and I was starting to lose hope, Shinji style. Fortunately for us, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I added a black wash and a rust dusting, which left it looking pretty good. But to make things even better, we're gonna add our Gribble. With the most important piece being this little moving crane, which if placed correctly is gonna play support for Unit 2. Little did I know using super glue was gonna come back to bite me in the ass. But for now, we're done. Right? Well, no, I was utterly disgusted by the base, so I fell into a deep state of depression for about a month until I had a spark of motivation. Wood. A wooden base with a resin top has got to look killer, so I dove into the bins where I found an octagon piece, perfect for our copycat. We're gonna do a small resin pour since I don't really have any experience with it aside from casting, so for our wall, I made the horrible choice of using a cardboard strip, which could have worked if it wasn't for the wonky cuts and the shit measuring. But also, it could have been worse, so what the hell. Before we pour, we have to prep our base, which we do with some blue acrylic. We do that since we want that ocean blue color to pop through the resin. With that done, we attach the walls using some super glue because I'm brain dead and seal the whole thing off with a little hot glue, leaving us with this piece of work.
Nice.
Now, our ship has aged a little during our time skip, which is kinda gross when you think about how dust is just human skin, so we're gonna have to do a little cleanup, which gets it looking presentable enough to cast. You make sure it fits, which it almost doesn't, and proceed to glue it into place. From there, we can start prepping our resin, which I was kinda worried wouldn't set since it's kinda old and there's just something about that year that doesn't sit right with me, but we proceed with caution. I eyeball the amount because how else would you do it, and got to mixing. I added a few drops of blue food dye to get a deeper blue since I really don't want the dyed wood to show through. From there, we start our pour using a wooden stick to soften the drop and reduce the bubbles, which hardly made a difference as you're about to see. But a good way to get rid of the surface bubbles is with a torch, which I didn't have, so I improvised a little. Using a Vicks lighter, I released some of the gas before sparking the flint and lighting the bubbles. I went a little crazy, but so did the bubbles, so it had to be done. After letting it dry for a few days, we're ready to unwrap, which would have been much easier if I would have just used something besides cardboard, but I didn't. So right off the bat, I was loving how shiny it was, but not so much the bubbles. And of course, our wood ended up being the reason for the extra bubbles, which came from it sucking up the resin, leaving a bunch of air to be trapped behind. Not much we can do now, so let's start sanding, which when it comes to resin, sucks balls. It's messy as hell and will literally kill you if you inhale it. Unfortunately for me, there's a lot of sanding to be done. I went from a 200 to a 2000 grit sandpaper. I could have gone for more, but the bubbles weren't worth the trouble. So maybe having an opaque layer isn't so bad, but I still wanted to cry. So we make ourselves a little buffing piece, because I don't have any real ones, and start buffing, using some metal polish, because again, that's the closest thing I have, and would you believe it? It didn't work. But with everything sanded, we can move on to painting, which, like always, goes wrong. Since apparently I spilled some blue right off the bat. So now that it's sanded, it should take in the black paint, except it doesn't. It had already taken in a lot of resin, which protected the wood and kept things unpainted. I should have totally painted it black back when I did the blue, but hindsight is always 20/20. But also screw it, we ain't bitch ass Shinji, so we carry on with our head held high. After a little bit more sanding and a lot more painting, we end up with a pretty good looking base. Unfortunately, we're not done with painting since we still need to touch up a few things, starting off with more yellow. Yuck. We're adding some guidelines, which I was ignoring until now. It might look messy, but you gotta trust the process. We wipe things off and finish the touch-ups using some black acrylic paint. Moving down to our resin, things are looking a little flat, especially compared to the waves I sculpted. So we're gonna add some here using a shiny gel medium, which is really popular when it comes to making ocean waves and ripples in dioramas. Unfortunately for me, I was trying to go for some really big waves, so I made the mistake of caking it on. Now, the best way to have done it would have been to slowly spread it one layer at a time, building it up as you go, but I didn't do that. So not only was the interior not drying clear, but there were a bunch of air bubbles stuck within, making things that much more shitty. But despite the bubbles, I still try to get a good water ripple going, and you do get a sense that the ship is being pushed forward, just not quite enough. Now this was after a day of drying, and as you can see, it wasn't looking too hot. Fortunately for us, the summer heat has been killer, so I left it in my oven of a car for a couple of days to dry out some more. After 2 days, we definitely got rid of some of the opaqueness, but things were still looking kinda cummy, which kinda helps us out since now we don't have to paint the tips white, so happy little accidents. But now that things are drier, you can get a better idea of just how many bubbles got trapped during the caking. So moral of the story,
use thinner coats.
Now, you might have noticed some pieces go missing during our crafting. Well, they kind of broke off, so we gotta reattach. We mix up a 2-part black epoxy, which I should have totally started with, and get to gluing. We start off with our footrest. followed by our spotlight turned random gribble, then our radio tower of course, and finish off with our crane, which suffered a little accident back when we were blasting bubbles. It's a little wonky, but only if you stare at it for too long, just like your face. And with that zinger, we're pretty much done. I could touch up and polish the resin, but again, I'm not a huge fan of the bubbles. So let's finish things off with our Eva UNIT-02, which setup is just a matter of using our footrest, giving us a sick pose like this. But things aren't limited to UNIT-02. Shinji is just as able, but maybe not as willing to ride the waves. Or if you're feeling romantical, you can have them both on at the same time. Slice of life type of shit. And thanks to our resin base, we can have heavier figures like Jet Jaguar doing his thing. Really, it can support just about anything. And for those wondering about the first base, well, let's just say it all comes tumbling down.
It all returns to nothing. I just keep letting me down, letting me down, letting me down. In my heart.
Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. That's pretty hardcore. Don't forget to leave a comment telling me why Shinji sucks, and of course, like and subscribe for more content. Stay poochy, and I'll catch you on the next one.